Hi, this is Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. This is somewhat of a follow-up to the last video I did, which was the Great Conspiracy. And I don't want to make my videos too long because sometimes when I make them too long, people won't, sit and listen. So I'm going to do it in smaller segments, and that way I can get the information to you. And also, kind of get the opportunity to digest it. Sometimes if it's new information, and may not be new information to some of you, but when it's new information, then sometimes it's harder to digest when you overwhelm someone. So I'll try to just give you bite-sized bits of the information so that you can digest it. But it's important for us to put the information together. So a lot of times we get fragments of information and facts and truths. But if we don't put together and help to establish ideologies and doctrine, then a lot of times it's not really beneficial to you. So I want you to understand that all these different components, all these different pieces that I put to you are fragments of information that are be put together to help you to hopefully build a doctrine, a theology, a worldview, if you will. And that worldview always has to come back to the scriptures, from my estimation. So anyway, first and foremost, I want to say something controversial. A lot of people don't want to hear this. One of the terms that they've been throwing around a lot, the true conspiracy that's going on, you understand that it's not white supremacy. It is a global conspiracy. So there are people that are globalists. There are certain bloodlines, ruling bloodlines, the ruling elite, if you will. And so white supremacy is just one of the tools that they use in order to inflame people, to separate people, to divide people, and ultimately to distract people. When you understand that the minority, the ruling minority, is not white, as we call it, and I'm using air quotes. It is a specific group of people. Like I always say, that race is a social construct that really doesn't exist. So the whole concept of white versus black or whatever color is a social construct that's created to distract and to divide and to have us to fight on the lower realms, where the people at the higher levels, the higher echelon, are controlling the narrative all the way around. So when you understand the globalist, the global conspiracy, the worldwide conspiracy, if you will, and as we kind of drill down into the people behind the conspiracy, like I did a little bit yesterday, and now I'm going to talk about some of the ways that they use to control and manipulate the masses. And so you have to understand that the Western culture, which is very prevalent throughout the world, is the culture that has been established by the global conspiracy to form a one world global government, also known as the New World Order. The Bible talks about it. It's on the back of your money. Novus Ordo Seclorum is on the back of your money, which is the New World Order. If you look on the back of your dollar bill, there's a pyramid. I don't think I have any dollars on me. There's a pyramid with an eye on the top, and it's not complete. So that is what the globalists, what they're doing is they are signaling of their intentions, right? And so that pyramid represents the tower that was being built in Genesis 11. And of course, we know the story that the Lord came down and dispersed them and separated them by language. And so the enemy since then has been trying to gather the masses together under a common language or common understanding in order to complete what they began in Genesis 11, which is talked about in Revelation, the book of the Revelation, right? The end of the Bible, the end of the age. And so I'm going to talk just briefly about one of the tools or the weapons that they use. You may have heard the term operant conditioning. Operant conditioning. It's also a term called classical conditioning. So operant conditioning, also known as instrumental conditioning, is a method of learning normally attributed. It's normally contributed to a sociologist, a social psychologist, if you will, by the name of B.F. Skinner. But B.F. Skinner, basically, he took his the foundation of what he taught on, or he began to write about and study, is from a gentleman by the name of Thorndike. And Edward Thorndike in 1898 wrote a law called the Law of Effect. So let me talk about him, and then I'm going to talk about B.F. Skinner and show you how that's relevant to you. So Thorndike's the Law of Effect According to this principle, behavior that is followed by pleasant consequences is likely to be repeated, and behavior followed by unpleasant consequences is less likely to be repeated. And so they began to study human psychology, and they first started to study in animals, and then because these globalists, these global elites, those who adhere to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, they believe that man is just a higher evolved animal. And we know that contradicts the Bible, because the Bible says that God didn't make us in a one-celled animal and we evolved on our own. It says that we were made in God's image, and God breathed his essence or his breath inside of us. So we are not simply higher level animals. We are image bearers, right? We are made in the image of God. But anyway, as they studied the law of effect, they studied principles on how to, behaviors, how to control behaviors. So what they said is pleasant consequences likely to be repeated, which means reward and punishment, right? So when you do something good, you get a reward. When you do something bad, you get a bad result, you get punished, right? So for instance, when they do some of the studies that they've done over the years, they would have a dog or a monkey, usually a monkey, or they did it on dogs as well. So they taught the dog or the animal to ring a bell, and every time he rang a bell, he got a treat. So the animal began to repeat that behavior over and over again. Also, there were certain behaviors that they weren't supposed to do. When they did the bad behaviors, then they got punished, like a little zap or electrical. It's like the shock collars that you put on dogs. When a dog does something bad, you hit the shock collar. It teaches the dog not to repeat that behavior. And likewise, otherwise, when they do something pleasant, then you get a reward for doing something pleasant. And that's how you usually train your children, right? When your children do something, they get good grades in school, you may give them money or buy them something or celebrate them. When they do bad, some parents like to punish, time out, or spanking them. That's a form of classical conditioning, which is based on what the law of effect. Now you may say, well, that's simplistic. What's wrong with that? But let's continue a little bit further. So now B.F. Skinner, he was a psychologist as well and a behaviorist, and many of them became very instrumental and influential in the culture, right? So what they did when the people that originally wanted to form a one world government, and this goes back from the time of the Industrial Revolution. During the time of the Industrial Revolution, the population began to grow. And so these people who consider themselves the ruling elite, they call themselves like philosopher kings. They're rulers, and they're the intellectuals in their estimation, the top tier of society. They believe that they have the right to rule over the masses. But of course, as the population began to explode during the Industrial Revolution, they couldn't maintain their control by force. And so they had to come up with other strategies in order to create a groupthink or compliance by the masses, right? So they began to study human psychology as a way to control the masses. And so, like I mentioned here, this guy, Edward Thorndike, and then, in the early part of the 20th century, they created the school system, the public school system, under the, with the intention on getting people to comply more, to create people that are more compliant to their strategies and not free thinkers. And so that's why like I said, it all derived from Europe. Our educational system is based on what's called the Prussian model. Prussia was the name of Germany before it was called Germany. And they began to use the school system in order to teach people compliance. That's why you have rows of desks. Everybody has to sit in line and they have to do things a certain way. And, our educational system, even lately with technology, has changed a little bit, but for many generations, it remained the same in how they taught the children. So they were teaching compliance. But now let's look at B.F. Skinner. Skinner is regarded the father of operant conditioning, but is based on the law of effect that Edward Thorndike started. And Skinner introduced a new term for the law of effect, which is reinforcement. Behavior which is reinforced tends to be repeated, i.e. strengthened, and behavior which is not reinforced tends to die out or be extinguished or weakened. Skinner in 1948 studied operant conditioning by conducting experiments using animals, which he placed in the Skinner box, which was similar to Thorndike's box. So they started this study back in the 1800s. B.F. Skinner took it to another level, or he built upon that, I should say. So whereas classical conditioning depends on developing associations between events, operant conditioning involves learning from the consequences of our behavior. Skinner wasn't the first psychologist, of course, to do this, but he is the most recent and most notable. Now, let me talk about the specific ways and how this is being implemented in order to cause groupthink or control. One of the ways that the welfare system. Now, before I go into detail, I want to explain to you that this is not a knock on anyone who's on welfare, because I do talks and I do lectures, and sometimes I give information, and I've had people come to me and they were a little offended. They may have had to be on welfare at some point in time, or they know people on. And so I had to make sure that I understood that I wasn't trying to offend anyone who's on public assistance or welfare. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm going to is the foundational principles behind how they set it up. So in the 1960s, with LBJ and his Great Society, he created, they called it the War on Poverty, but he created the welfare and social programs as a way not to help the community out, but to weaken the family unit and weaken individuals and get them dependent on the government. So how does this line up what we're talking about operant conditioning? So when you think about it from a psychological basis, that the welfare system is set up to reinforce certain behaviors. So if you have a child out of wedlock, you get a check, you get money from the government, you get support. If you get married, you immediately get taken off of public assistance. So what does that mean? It means it's rewarding you to have, out of wedlock pregnancies, and it is somewhat, to a certain extent, punishing you. The system is punishing you for getting married. Now, you may say, well, people don't really think that way, but I tell you from firsthand knowledge, even working, especially in a disenfranchised community, and people that come from broken families or they have low self-esteem, this really does affect them. And I know from firsthand experience, I've done over years, mentored young people, worked with youth for years. I also know people in the school system that will tell you that some of these young ladies, in high school, they'll get pregnant and they get a lot of attention. And so that's a reinforcement that, hey, wow, you got a baby. That's wonderful. And then there's conversations where they'll tell their peers, hey, if you get a baby, you get a check, right? So this is a form of operant conditioning, and it was intentional. It wasn't like it happened by happenstance. And the reason we know this is because one of LBJ's, not only his quote that he knew that he was creating a system that was going to get Black people especially was targeted for this, not only get them weak and dependent on the government, but loyal to the Democratic Party. And he is quoted as saying this off record, but Buchanan, there was a gentleman who made a report, who was one of his senior advisors, who actually stated back in the 60s that he saw this weakening in the family, and that the fathers in the Black community would become less and less visible. And that has happened over the last 50 years. The family unit, especially in the Black community, has gone from 22% out of wedlock births to over 72%. Some places they say 74%. So this is a demonstration of operant conditioning, and it was meant to control, not to empower. Another way that they do this is groupthink. So they create groupthink. Things like popular culture was actually created by the power structure, and popular culture is to reinforce certain behaviors. And so if you are in popular culture, then whatever you do, people, this is popular, this is what people are doing. And subconsciously, it sends a signal, especially the young people, that this is how you should behave, or this is how you should act. If you look in the media, if you look in music, especially in hip hop music and other genres of music, if you look at any of their videos, they're all walking around with wads of cash. They're driving around with expensive cars and jewelry. They're partying constantly. And they're also instilling bad behavior. So the whole gangster persona, drug dealer, thug, all these type of things are the behaviors that they are demonstrating while showing wads of cash. I mean, literally tens of thousands of dollars. They walk around with jewelry that's worth money, cars that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, in houses, and they're partying all the time, which is encouraging what's called hedonism, which is you live your life just based on pursuing pleasure, not on purpose. So these are things that they're doing. It reinforces that behavior that if you live like this is the result of it. And so a lot of people are duped, especially our young people, to believe that that's reality when it really isn't. And they're doing it intentionally. If you look at any of their videos, even their Instagram posts or their blogs that they do, every single one that you see is smoking a blunt or drinking some kind of liquid. We assume that it's alcohol, and they're doing it to promote that lifestyle as normal. And it is saying that if you do these things, then you'll have a great life like I'm having, right? That is to reinforce or to strengthen certain behaviors. And likewise, if you just work a regular 9 to 5 job, especially a young person, if you're working at McDonald's or something like that, you were struggling. You don't have a whole lot of extra money. And so it's basically kind of like weakening or punishing that behavior. And it's encouraging you to take the quick route out financially and to live your life. The third one is social media. So social media is actually set up in a way to encourage certain behaviors. If you see when they have likes on your social media, right? So Instagram and all these other things, people are liking them or they're sharing things. And so what it's doing subconsciously, especially with a lot of our young ladies who have low self-esteem, is it's encouraging them to be very sexy or seductive, because every time they have a shot with their behind out or very seductive, they get likes, and it reinforces that behavior. Psychologically, it's like when they give the animal a treat for ringing the bell, right? Every time they do something or certain behaviors, even when people act ratchet or they get on their cuss and they have all these rants, they get likes or shares or they get attention. And that's a form of reinforcing that particular behavior. And that's how they use to cause groupthink, to sway public opinion in a certain way. And ultimately, it's a form of social engineering that leads society to their expected end, which is to be controlled by this ruling elite. And so just wanted to share that with you. Stay tuned for more. Please like and subscribe and share the videos. I'm going to do a couple more along these lines. So please continue to keep your eyes open and always be aware of what's going on around you. This is Joe Green. Until next time, peace and blessings to you.